it's my pleasure to be called from the substitutes bench to deliver this lecture. And while I'm on the subject of sport, if anybody knows the whereabouts of the wonderful photos lost for many years of school football teams, which were on display in the Pentland building in the Nicholson Institute, the Society would be very interested to hear from you. Also, any ideas would be welcome about the whereabouts of the original plans of the Lewis War Memorial, which is going to be the subject of renovation and refurbishment in the near future. Tonight I've not come here with a caseload of artefacts. Only about 5% of the Society's holdings are artefacts, with the remaining 95% being archival material in the form of photos, historical records, documents and reports about places, institutions and people. The title of tonight's lecture is well chosen, Snapshots from the Stornoway Archive. We can just scratch the edge of Stornoway's history in the time available, so the journey will be short by duration, short by distance, just covering the town of Stornoway, but long by time, spanning several hundred years in some of the images. You can see, if some of you are technically minded, you can see that I'm using Windows Photo Viewer tonight instead of PowerPoint. This medium allows a bit more flexibility. Once you've set up a PowerPoint, you're stuck with it. So I'm starting with a painting here, An Oil on Canvas, by James Barrett of 1798. Strangely, it is held in the National Portrait Gallery, although we see little evidence of portraits in the scene. This is one of the earliest known paintings of Stornoway, and James Barrett was employed by the Mackenzie family, owners of much of Lewis, to paint two scenes of Stornoway, and the other is held by the local museum. This painting clearly shows what Sandy Matheson has referred to on many occasions as the Point Street Peninsula. It also shows a bustling harbour with a lot of boats and a clipper out in the outer harbour towards Arnish. You can also see quite clearly Goat Island, obviously without the causeway, and the point of Arnish without the lighthouse. However, we can go back further than 1798 to the year 1762, and this is where the use of Photo Viewer comes in very handy as opposed to PowerPoint, because I'm going to motor around this map in a minute. This map of Stornoway, shown tonight with the permission of the National Archives, shows the peninsula but at that time, as you can see, Point Street does not go to the end of the peninsula. The old Stornoway Castle is identified by a drawn circle with a wee line to the corner or end of South Beach, and interestingly moving out into the harbour. We see the only island in the harbour, which we know as Goat Island, and on this old map it's named as Eilean na Gúil. No reference whatsoever to goats, and again our honorary president touched on that. So that's 1762. My third image, also shown with permission of the National Archives, is of a plan of the Loch of Stornoway. And it's turned sideways from, the normal north-south orientation, because that is the way it's laid out in the National Archives, with the words Loch of Stornoway at the top. Again, I'm going to expand it. Oh, sorry about that. We've now moved into a slideshow. So back to the Loch of Stornoway, and we'll expand it a wee bit. And if we actually look at, again, the Point Street Peninsula, we can see the little sketch of a church right here. And because this drawing is dated 1630, it's quite clear that that drawing is of the St. Lenon's Church, which is the oldest identifiable church in Stornoway. Stornoway Castle, again, is shown on this map quite clearly. Interestingly, the only island in the harbour, which again we know as Goat Island, is here named as something Birral, B-I-R-R-A-L, and it's debatable whether the prefix abbreviation is an E or an F, and certainly my own research has not found anything clear about what Birral is all about. This view is dated 1846, and it's by an artist called Hans Busk. Hans Busk lived from 1815 to 1882, and he was the eldest son of Sir Hans Busk of Glen Alder, Radnorshire, which is now part of Powys in Wales. Busk was a graduate of King's College London and Trinity College Cambridge. He was a lawyer, a gun enthusiast, a military historian. He had interests in boat design, and he also had ideas for establishment of the first lifeboat stations. But why did he come to Stornoway? There is no clear answer. This is a pencil sketch with coloured heightening of a street scene on Bay Head, and it shows from the left a thatched building, a man shoeing a horse, a lady and children looking on, a line of single-storey buildings in the background, and the edge of a two-storey building on the near right. And there is some debate about where the artist was standing. One possibility is the end of Kenneth Street, looking round the first bend of Bay Head towards the Celtic clothing shop. The second one is the end of New Street, looking along the next bend of Bay Head, past where Mackenzie Street is now. But there is no precise or defined evidence available, and those who have studied this drawing tend to go for option 2, that is, from the bottom of New Street. Now we get into the real nitty-gritty. This image, dated 1878, is from a glass plate negative by George Washington Wilson. Wilson's collection is held at the Aberdeen University Photographic Archive. And you may also have seen in a recent feature in Back in the Day reference to 120 plates found in Canada and believed to be the property of a Norman MacLeod who worked for George Washington Wilson. And some of these were actually published in Back in the Day. So I'm going to return to this GWW image in a wee while in greater detail, using the excellent digital viewer on the Aberdeen University website, which allows significant magnification without breaking the photos into pixels. You can see here the remains of the old Stornoway Castle, which was located approximately on the site of maritime buildings, which were demolished in 2007. This is another photo of the old castle, this time a mounted photo. And this castle, for over 250 years from the 12th century, became the centre of various war zones in Stornoway Harbour, involving Nichol Hasson, the MacLeods, the Earl of Huntly, the Duke of Argyll, the Fife Adventurers, until it was finally reduced to ruins by the forces of Oliver Cromwell in 1653, with the ruins, as seen here, later removed in 1882 for construction of the main pier. And a plaque commemorating the old castle was on display in Maritime Buildings on number 1 pier, As I said, they were demolished in 2007, and the plaque is now in the safe custody of the Stornoway Port Authority in Amity House. Now I'll turn to the marvels of the digital viewer. What I'm doing here is I'm going across the centre of the photograph from right to left and magnifying bits of it to actually bring out certain buildings which are of great interest. In this first scene, we see the South Beach, James Street corner. Try and just make it a wee bit bigger as well. And these are the two buildings that are very interesting. That one there is the United Presbyterian Church, known to us recently as Church House, James Street, the business premises of the late N.D. MacLeod, and it was built in 1860. Now further over on the left, if I can get the thing to move, just to the left here, that's this building here, is what I believe is a unique view of the first Nicholson Institute building without the clock tower. This building was opened on 27th February 1873, and it's seen here without the clock tower, which was not completed until 1902, with the clock chimes added in 1905. Moving on to the next part of the photograph, we see here the Imperial Hotel and St. Peter's Church. St. Peter's Church, I'll home in on that one, right here, which was featured in a recent edition of SY Gone By. A very old church, completed in 1838, dedicated in 1839, and consecrated in 1898. Imperial Hotel here. That is the same image as we had a wee minute ago of the Stornoway Castle, but there are some interesting, very interesting buildings in the background. So I'm going to expand a wee bit and go up to the top here, where we can see here St. Columba's Church, the old parish church, the established Church of Scotland, which was completed in 1794. And very interestingly here, in two different colours, the Stornoway Courthouse. Now the reason for it being in two different colours is that the bit on this side was the original bit and the newer bit is the extension. And it started off just with a courthouse and prison designed by Thomas Brown Jr. in 1843, and the extension, which is shown lighter on this image, was by Andrew Maitland in 1870. The 1843 structure consisted of about half the present building plus the jail, and the 1870 extension was to the St. Columba's Church side of the building. Moving further across the photo, we see here two ships at the pier. There are actually two ships there because you can see two funnels and you can see four masts. And with the help of Colin Tucker, we identified the nearer of the two ships as the SS Ferret, which was then owned by the Dingwall and Skye Railway Company, and it covered the Stornoway to Strome ferry service from 1873 to 1880. Now there's a wonderful story about the ferret, which I don't have time to cover tonight, so speak to Colin Tucker. Amity House, you can see on the left-hand side, originally known as Esplanade House, a Georgian villa, dating from about 1830, originally a customs office and now the headquarters of the Stornoway Port Authority. Over here, this impressive building is the Stornoway Free Church, which was completed in 1845, destroyed by fire in 1850, and rebuilt soon afterwards on the same site. And the final one, as we move across the George Washington Wilson image, the final one involves the sail loft, the back of it here. I'll just expand it a wee bit again. Back of the sail loft here. The sail loft dates to about 1800. This white building is the back of the Lewis Hotel, built 1829. Over here we have the Royal Hotel, and a building with a line of windows on the first floor is Lodge Fortrose 108, built and established in 1767. Now we leave these George Washington Wilson images and move over to the Lewis War Memorial. And this is the memorial as we know it today. It's an impressive structure, 85 feet tall, and one of the largest war memorials in the UK, and recently the subject of an award of significant funding from the War Memorials Trust, which will be backed by other organisations to aid its imminent refurbishment and restoration. Here is a view from the site of the War Memorial, looking south over the harbour. No golf course yet. Lewis Castle to the right, and Goat Island in the middle with no causeway. It's interesting that this is an image of a Valentine postcard named Stornoway from the War Memorial, but a check on the postcard's registration date revealed it was registered in 1923, the year before the unveiling and dedication of the memorial on the 11th September 1924. And my first reaction was, what a pity that the photographer did not turn round and snap the memorial, which was under construction at the time, rather than give us a shot of a field. Anyway, here's an interesting one. This is a view that Lord Leverhulme would have had when he addressed the huge crowd at the unveiling and dedication of the memorial in September 1924. You can see the Army and Navy personnel at the front and the huge crowd spreading down the hill. This angle is taken slightly differently from the previous one. This one is pointing more towards the town rather than the harbour. So there's a slight difference in the angle. So I'm now going to move over to the Lewis Castle. And a lot of you will have seen this. Again, it is a Valentine postcard. And this one is dated 1906. And it shows the castle, the tennis court, and the conservatories. And on the right, this little white thing here is the lip of the basin of the fountain. And right behind this big bush here is the stone centre of the fountain, which you can still see as you walk up the path around the present Lewis Castle. Now, the Society has been involved in historical research for the Castle Grounds Regeneration Project, and we have concluded that the conservatories were the work of a James Cranston from Birmingham, and we based these conclusions on comparison with some of Cranston's published designs of horticultural buildings. If you can just have a look at the style of the doors in the conservatory and the size of the glass panels and the angles of the glass walls and roofs, and then compare it with this extract from some of Cranston's published works. There are a lot of similarities, especially the doors. This is an image which was given to the Society by Kenny McKeever, the journalist and broadcaster. And it's an excellent image from a glass slide negative, one of the best we have of the fountain. And Kenny thinks it dates to about 1920. You can see somebody sitting on the edge of the fountain's basin, and this is the only image that I've ever seen of the fountain in action. Here we have 6 ladies by the fountain, and the lady on the left with her arm like this, you can just look under her arm and you can see the same metal structure as we saw in the previous image from which the water was spouting. All these ladies were members of staff at the Lewis Castle in 1921. We know some of them, we don't know others. So, on the back row from left to right, the first one is unknown. The second one is a Chrissy Martin, mother of Francis Mackay. The third one is a Mrs. MacDonald, grandmother of Irma Mackenzie, Irma Flett, and the wife of Kenny MacDonald, who was the Lewis Castle caretaker. In the front, left to right, again the first one is unknown. The second one is a Rachel Mackay, and the third one is Annie MacLeod, later Mrs. Mackay, Creed Cottage, mother of my own cousin Chrisma. This is a photo courtesy of the Royal Commission for Ancient and Historic Monuments in Scotland, and it's of the fountain. It was taken in 2003 before the heavy undergrowth was removed. This is a section of a first edition Ordnance Survey 6-inch map. Survey date was 1849 and publication date 1850. And it's from the National Library of Scotland Maps collection. Over here, we can see the distillery and the sawmill. This bit here was called the Irregular Pond. And if I just home in on that, you can see a wee island in the middle of the irregular pond. Well, not in the middle, but on the irregular pond. And the island was actually a man-made artificial island in the form of a heart. So there's something romantic about the irregular pond. Over here, the circle. This is called the circular pool. And if you take a walk up the high road, past the castle, up the hill, to the first corner, which goes to the left at the top of the hill, just past the castle gates, and just walk off the road there, you can still clearly see the shape of the circular pool. It now has a tree which has seeded right in the middle of it. But I actually went up there about a year ago with Sandy Matheson, and he's been walking past there all these years, and he was amazed he'd never actually seen it before. So I thought this extract from this old map would be of interest. In the Stornoway Public Library, there's a very old map by William Ogburn, dated 1850. The map is entitled Plan of the Lewes, or the Lewes Demesne, Demesne. And it's a big thing, it's massive. But I took a wee chunk out of it here. I didn't actually cut it out, I took it out digitally. And I've expanded it. And what you see here is the circular pool, which I've just mentioned. And this structure in the middle is the terraces of the Sunken Garden. Those of you who have been up there will probably know that there are central steps between the first and second terrace. but they don't feature on this plan. And that would tend to prove that the steps were installed either in the eras of Major Duncan Matheson or Lord Leverhulme. Right on here, this bit, recent archaeological activity involving a company from Musselburgh revealed the foundation of a crescent-shaped building in the middle terrace, possibly a glass house, or maybe even a covered lounge area for taking afternoon tea. So that is going to be the subject of further archaeological experiment. These three images are shown tonight courtesy of the Stornoway Trust from their website. And the top left one of Curry Point is as it was on the 1785 map of Stornoway, when it was known as Artnaree Point. The top right shows the 1852 proposals for development by Sir James Matheson, and the lower centre is the way it was in 1899, after development by Matheson, but before completion of the shore road to the Creed. Now, here we come to a beauty. The Society received a donation of a box of assorted photographs. This one was among them, and it was only 2.5 by 2 inches. It's a tiny photo, and its content puzzled the Society Committee for about 6 months. With the help of Ross MacLeod of the Gazette office, we tidied it up a wee bit, and it's amazing what it showed. We had no idea what the photo represented, but then the problem was solved by Malcolm. And what a find it turned out to be. The photo was taken on the Lewis Castle Green, that's obvious, and it shows Provost Murdo MacLean in his first public engagement after receiving the gift of ceremonial robes from Lord Leverhulme. The date is in the summer of 1919, just after World War I, and just after the Ireland disaster. And Provost MacLean is seen here presenting the Royal Humane Society Medal and the Lloyd's Medal for Bravery to John Finlay MacLeod, RNR of Ness, the father of John MacLeod, the boat builder, and the grandfather of Ian MacLeod, currently of Churchill Drive. John Finlay MacLeod had been instrumental in the saving of around 40 lives by swimming ashore from the Isle Ayr with a line or a rope. Seated on the stage, the guy in uniform on the far end is Lieutenant Boxall of the Coastguard. Then we can just see Leverhulme's leg here, as he hung over a seat to speak to somebody behind. And this is confirmation of his deafness. Lord Leverhulme was very deaf, and this, he would have to turn his back over the seat to either hear somebody behind him or conduct a conversation. His two sisters are present. One is invisible behind the two guys who are standing, and the other one is visible. Then we see the three gentlemen at the end. The one in the soft hat here is Baillie Roderick Smith, and the last two on the stage are Leverhulme's guests, a Robert Tootill MP from Bolton, and the last guy is the Mayor of Blackpool. So that was quite a find, and credit to Malcolm for finding all this information in the Highland News. So moving out of the castle grounds, we exit via the Porter's Lodge, a Category B listed building, which is also on the Scottish Register of Buildings at Risk. When Sir James Matheson had distinguished visitors at the castle, he wanted to ensure that the drive from the harbour to the castle would be impressive. And so Matheson Road came into existence, with a wall erected on the left-hand side of the road up from James Street. And we can still see some of that area which was planted with trees and shrubs from Park House, the residence of Mr. Colin Scott Mackenzie, onwards to Matheson Road's junction with Church Street. At the end of Matheson Road, the entry to the castle had to be equally impressive, and so the Porter's Lodge was built. And this imposing structure displays the Matheson coat of arms. Right at the top. I suppose a lot of you will have walked through there and you won't have noticed the coat of arms right up at the top. On a personal note, I'm not going to mince my words here. The present state of this iconic building is nothing short of a disgrace. It's an embarrassment to locals who accompany visitors on walks into the grounds, and the lack of renovation activity by the Stornoway Trust over the past 50 years is shameful. But they could still find £1 million to wreck the castle grounds by clearing rhododendrons and by building mudslides, which they call bike tracks. And these are just an accident waiting to happen. Hopefully, with the finance awaited from the Parks for People project, a lot of it will be used on the Porter's Lodge to counteract its decades of neglect. I now move onto the Bay Head, and we stop at the bowling green. This is not a very clear photograph. It's not too bad, though. And it's Lord Leverhulme actually bowling at the opening in July 1922. On the left, again in the soft hat, is Roderick Smith, now Provost of Stornoway during the first of his 2 terms. And up on the stage, wearing the kilt, is Sir Harry Lauder, who had been invited along by Lord Leverhulme. And on the right, in the white flat cap, is Captain A.M. Fletcher, Leverhulme's Chamberlain. I'm now heading over to the other side of the town, to South Beach, and I'm using this excellent Valentine postcard dated 1925 as my starting point. When the image is magnified, you can see the ruins of the town hall, which had been totally destroyed by fire in 1918. This is the original town hall, a 3-floor building opened by Lord Rosebery in 1905 on ground formerly owned by the family of Lieutenant Colin Mackenzie. The foundation stone was laid by Major Duncan Matheson of Lewis Castle on August the 12th, 1903, and the building was planned to accommodate municipal chambers, recreation rooms, public library, and the offices of the Lewis estate. But after the opening of the building, it became a hive of community and government activity, accommodating not only the Town Council and the Lewis Estate Office, but temporarily the Pier and Harbour Commission, also the Lewis District Committee, the parish councils of Lochs, Barvas and Stornoway, the Food Control Committee, local tribunals, the Fisheries Board, the Borough Engineer, the library, and even a sewing club. At the onset of war in 1914, the building was taken over by the Admiralty as a naval depot and base, and the YMCA ran a canteen in the main hall for naval personnel in transit, and also a temporary dormitory for servicemen from rural Lewis who were awaiting departure to war service via Stornoway Harbour. But the town hall did not survive the war, being ravaged by fire in March 1918. This is the front view of the shell of the building looking across South Beach. This is a view of the South Beach Cromwell Street corner, and if we zoom up to the top, we can actually see all that's left of the fireplaces on the 3rd floor. So there's a lot more on the 3rd floor in the old town hall than we have in our present town hall. This is a view of the Cromwell Street, Point Street corner. The fire started in the canteen area and took rapid hold. After the central roof caved in, the building was a burnt-out shell within 2 hours. And remembering the large number of organisations using the town hall, which I have already listed, Stornoway not only suffered the tragic loss of the magnificent building, but also the old records of its tenant organisations, with greatest losses being by the Town Council and the Lewis Estate Office, leaving huge gaps in the municipal and administrative history of Stornoway and Lewis. However, in 1929, the new town hall was ready for opening. This photo is dated 1932, and it shows the rebuilt town hall, which was opened by Thomas Bassett Macaulay, T.B. Macaulay of Montreal. He was president of the Sun Life Assurance Company of Canada. His grandfather was a fishing boat skipper from Uig, and the grandfather moved to Fraserburgh, where a son, Robertson Macaulay, was born. After the death of his father, Robertson came to Stornoway to live with his aunt, and he later emigrated to Canada in 1854, where he became president of the Sun Life Assurance Company of Canada after a long service in the company, and that position was subsequently held by his son, Thomas Bassett, known as T.B. Macaulay, at the time of the rebuilding of the town hall. There were many welcome contributions to the rebuilding fund, but among the most generous contributors were T.B. Macaulay, John Bain, a banker from Chicago, who was brother of Provost Louis Bain, and William McCaskill, also of Chicago. I thought it would be of interest to you to show you the two town halls in a single image, just so that you can get a grip of the differences between them. The number 0944 in the top right is just a serial number from a collection, not a date. This top one of the old town hall was a used postcard from the 4th of July 1909, which was sent to New York and subsequently returned to the Stornoway Historical Society by the recipient. Below is the present town hall, and you can see the main difference between the two is the extensive third or attic floor in the original building. And next I move to a short display of Stornoway businesses and shop fronts, starting with John the Barber's at the corner of Point Street and Key Street. Then we have Hugh Matheson Limited on Francis Street, and Angus MacLeod Bakers, 37 Cromwell Street, a site later occupied by the SCWS and presently the Co-op. In this 1953 image, we can see the SCWS on the right and Peter MacDonald's shop on the left. Peter Squeaks. It occupied part of the building which now accommodates the Bank of Scotland. The photograph was recently posted on Facebook by Michael McLennan. However, the photo held by the Society, believe it or not, is a postcard sold in the Philippines in the 1950s. Those of you who were present at a talk on Stornoway shops will recall Sandy Matheson's reference to the background to the nickname Peter Squeak. He could not pronounce the word picturesque, and I'll make brief reference again to this subject right at the end of the lecture. On Bay Head we had John Mackenzie, the baker, Johnny Oak, and this photo is shown following a challenge which I accepted to see if I could find it. I couldn't leave Stornoway shops without having a look at Smith's shoe shop. This one was taken off the inside of the shop in the 1970s, and it will be familiar to many of you. But few of you may be aware that this business enjoyed the accolade of having the first self-service shoe shop in the UK. A few sundry photos around the town now. This photo from an album donated by the Hebburn family shows the old fountain in Percival Square. And you can also see the gardener's cottage and Lewes Castle in the background on the other side of the harbour. Now, I think I saw Ian Macaulay coming in. Are you here, Ian? Yes. You'll be interested in this one, Ian, the next one. I think Cathy will be interested in it too. We have to be very careful about copyright and tampering with photographs and so on. But I can assure you this Valentine's postcard is a fake. Allegedly, this is a Valentine postcard registration number A7804, which you can see on the bottom right-hand corner. And when you look up the registration details for Valentine postcards, you see that A7804 was registered in 1939. Cathy, what's wrong with the photo?
Pier's too long.
There wasn't any pier there in 1939. The pier hadn't been extended. So the pier is too long. You're absolutely correct. So we now have a look at a wee search for the proper version of A7804, and here it is. This time with 3 piers. The correct image for the year 1939, the year of registration of the postcard. The fake postcard is identical to the valid postcard in all respects, except the number of piers and the length of number 1 pier. I suspect that the original 1939 with the 3 piers has been doctored to show what the harbour would look like with 2 piers plus an extension to number 1, which was the outcome of the major development plans for the harbour, which were implemented in the late 1940s. If we go back, have a look at the boat, have a look at the reflection of maritime buildings, have a look at the 3 vehicles on South Beach, okay, and then we move forward. This will pixelate when I expand it, but we'll try a wee bit, not too bad. There's your same 3 vehicles on South Beach. There's the same boat and the same reflection of maritime buildings. So the previous one with the 2 piers has been doctored, and it's still shown there as a South Beach and piers from Gallows Hill with a registration number A7804, which was actually taken in 1939. So I thought that was quite an interesting one. Have you got that in your collection?
I'm not sure.
Aye.
Have to check now.
It's not worth anything. This is a photo of herring girls in action, and it was taken on North Beach Quay in the vicinity of the front of the Lewes Hotel. It was used on a tea towel which went on sale at the Herring Girls exhibition at the Arts Centre last year. In the background is the sail loft and the Esso signs on the petrol pumps of Kenneth McLennan Company, later K. McLennan Oils Limited. Up on the back you can also see a van towing a tank. And on that tank, right here, are the words Royal Daylight. And as many of you will be aware, Kenneth McLennan Company were the prime distributors of paraffin in the Isle of Lewis. And the brand name Royal Daylight was the brand name for Esso paraffin until the early 1950s, when it changed to Esso Blue. The next 4 photographs show a busy Stornoway harbour when the fishing industry was at its height, and this one shows a hive of activity on the South Beach Quay. 2 of the boats are identifiable as being from Fraserburgh and Banff. In the next image, we see an equally busy North Beach quay. Some very good examples of vehicles of the time. I think I can identify that one there as being a Model T Ford van, which is identifiable by the oval shape on the wall just behind the driver's position. In fact, Kenneth McLennan and Company had a Model T Ford van, and that could well be theirs. I don't know. Moving on, we see an absolutely top-class photograph. The clarity of this photograph is amazing. And it's a photograph of two fishing boats, SY495, the Gowan, and SY110, the Harvest. And I'm not sure if Margaret Nicholson's in the room tonight, but I have found a print of this photograph. Good. I've got it with me, Margaret, because she was telling me that the SY495, the Gowan, had links with Ranish. So hopefully a print of the photograph will be of some assistance to her in taking her research further. Here we see a packed, lazy corner. A poorer quality photograph, but very interesting. This, right in the corner. SY486. Now, SY486 was the Mornack. And the Mornack was ordered in 1903 from the yard of W. Mackintosh, Port Essie in Bucky, for Sandy MacLeod of Knock. It was the last of the Zulus to be operated exclusively by sail. So when I see a photograph like that, I'm not just looking at the whole photograph, I'm looking at tiny little bits to see what kind of story can be attached to the actual image itself. And I had seen that photograph several times, but only recently picked up that it was the Mornack in the corner. The fish mart. Up to the early 1890s, fish buying and selling was conducted from a ramshackle stance on number 1 pier. Then the Stornoway Pier and Harbour Commission engaged an architect, Alexander MacDonald, who designed the octagonal building with a central area 51 feet across and 14 offices, including a telegraph office, surrounding a central area. The upper floor could actually accommodate 250 people who could look down on sampled herring, which was on sale. And this building opened for business in 1894. There was a great storm in 1921, which blew down the chimney stacks, and it was alleged that they were later rebuilt to an inferior standard. Later on, when ceremonial bunting was tied between the harbour watchroom and one of the chimney stacks, a high lorry passed underneath the bunting string and succeeded in pulling down the chimney stack instead of breaking the string. And in 1970, the Pier and Harbour Commission took the decision to demolish the building, thus removing from the harbour scene a much-loved structure. But its design is not forgotten, being resurrected in the octagonal shape of the Stornoway ferry terminal. My timing is working out pretty good, folks, so we're all right. During World War II, photography in the vicinity of ports and harbours was prohibited in accordance with national security regulations. However, in order to record maritime scenes for posterity during the war, the government, via its Ministry of Defence, employed war artists. And one of these artists, named Stephen Bone, visited Lewis in 1942 and 1943 and painted many scenes of Stornoway Harbour and various sea lochs in Lewis. He chose some of the sea lochs because there were actually navy boats lying at anchor in some of the sea lochs, like Loch Erisort and Loch Rogue. This one is called Stornoway 6 p.m. I should have said, sorry. The impressive collection is held in the Imperial War Museum, and they have given me permission to show these images. This one is entitled Stornoway 6 p.m. Drifters Setting Sail. And you can also see right in the foreground, right at the bottom of the picture, the shore-based naval establishment HMS Mentor, which was set up on the Lewis Castle Green. The next image by Stephen Bone shows armed trawlers and a coasting vessel loading kippers. In the foreground you can see the trawlers with the guns on the bows. And this one is just entitled Stornoway Drifters in the Harbour, identifiable as Stornoway by the buildings in the background, and in particular the spire of Martin's Church. And finally, in this sample of Stephen Bone's work, a beautiful painting of an RAF air sea rescue launch anchored out in the harbour. That is an absolute cracking picture. Now, during my work as a researcher and archivist, I sometimes get quite complex inquiries, and sometimes get quite surprising inquiries from people. And the next couple of images are all about one of these inquiries. This sketch was printed in the Highland News in March 1893, and it depicts a Murdo Morrison of Kenneth Street, Stornoway. And my reason for accessing the Associated Press reports, with the help of Cathy Mackay, who had done a lot of the research, was to answer a question posed by a lady in Edinburgh who had an inscribed silver tray. Murdo Morrison was a late member of her family, and she wanted to know the background to the inscription. The inscription reads, "Presented to Mrs. Murdo Morrison, along with a public address to her husband, by the inhabitants of Stornoway on the occasion of their leaving their native place for the south." And Cathy's research revealed a lot of great things about this guy, Murdo Morrison. As I may have said already, he was a fish curer by occupation. He was a distinguished citizen. He was the German vice-consul. He was manager of a large workforce. He was known as a model employer. He was an accomplished public speaker. He was described as being of sterling integrity, and he was a magistrate and a harbour commissioner. The presentation of the tray turned out to be an auspicious event to celebrate Murdo's distinguished contribution to his hometown, and it was held in the Masonic Hall. And it was quite, a sort of satisfaction to be able to report back with Cathy's help in that detail to the lady in Edinburgh, and she was over the moon about it. I'll now turn briefly back to the town hall, and this image is of the inside of the old town hall in 1913. And you may notice that tonight I'm wearing a V-neck which commemorates the 125th anniversary of the Stornoway Golf Club. That was last year, 2015. The golf club, which has its origins at Melbus Links, has now moved to the Lady Lever Park, and the old links are the present site of Stornoway Airport. And this photo of the inside of the town hall shows the Stornoway Golf Club Bazaar, which was held over 2 days in 1913 to raise funds for the construction of a clubhouse, the estimated cost of which would be £500. And the bazaar raised £502 and 9 shillings. and so the club was duly able to erect their clubhouse at the Stainish end of the course. That's a new clubhouse, and it was officially opened in August 1913. I'll tell you a wee bit of a background here, which the research for this, I was assisted by a colleague on the mainland. And there's a large oil painting which hangs in the village hall in Everton in Easter Ross. And the painting is of a Major Randall Jackson, Randle, of Sordell. Not Sordell Point, but Sordell, Everton, Easter Ross. And he presented Stornoway Golf Club with its first competitive medal in the form of the Jackson Medal, and is still competed for today. Here is one side of the Jackson Medal, showing the Jackson clan crest and the emblem Jamais arrière in French, which means never behind. On the other side of the medal, we have the name of the donor and the date, July 17, 1890, and that is thought to be the precise date of the club's institution. Scottish golf history states that the club was instituted in July 1890, and it is thought extremely unlikely that the Major would have chosen a different date in the same month, because it was the first medal to be played for competitively in the club. A photo of 5 golfers, and I choose my words carefully here, at the picturesque Melbus Links in the 1930s. J. McLean, Peter Squeak MacDonald with a pipe. That's why I said picturesque. Dan McGregor of the library, Malcolm Macaulay, Callum Cawley, and in the front, Neil Macmillan, grandfather of Neil Henderson, his sister Ismay, and his brothers. This photo was taken some point in the 1930s. I should say at this point that I have done a presentation in Stornoway Golf Club in the 125th anniversary year, and that accurate presentation on its own included exactly 100 images. So that proves what I said right at the beginning. What I'm doing tonight is really just scratching the surface, and all the little topics that I mentioned could be hugely expanded on in the form of more detailed information for audiences. That is a sketch which we got hold of from an online publisher called After the Battle. Now, after the battle, we're looking at what had happened to RAF airports after the Second World War. And they got on to me because of my involvement with Stornoway Golf Club, and I was able to supply them with a lot of information from the golf club records and also from the Stornoway Trust, and some information that I held myself, because my late uncle Edwin Aldred was instrumental in dealing with the compensation money from the Ministry of Defence and the setting up of the golf club in the Lady Lever Park. Anyway, this is a sketch of Melbus Golf Course with a pre-World War II grass airfield of Captain Ted Fleeson, aviation pioneer, superimposed. That's a dotted bit. And all these lines that you can see here and there on the sketch are the holes of Melbus Links as it was in play at that time. Now, as we all know, the Air Ministry took over the entire course, the clubhouse and outbuildings, and the club later set up again in Lady Lever Park using the financial compensation paid by the Air Ministry. Now, with 58 slides, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes tonight's snapshots from the Stornoway Archive. What I intend to do now is just see if I can leave a slideshow to run. There we are. I'll just leave the slideshow to run. I have merely touched the edges of the wealth of history linked to our town of Stornoway. I'll leave it running as a slideshow. Every community has a history, but the volume of content of that history is dependent on the continuity of researching, recording and archiving. And in this context, Stornoway Historical Society is indebted to the considerable efforts of our founder members from the early 1990s, who set the high standards for future committees to aspire to. Today's news is tomorrow's history. Thank you.